Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field.
Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Insights Podcast. I hope you are doing okay. If you are in Fresno and you have kids in Fresno Unified School District, I hope they have a first day back to school. If you're a teacher and an administrator, or if your kids are just going back to school today, have a wonderful day. Right? I dropped off my kids today. Today is the 19th of August. I know this is going to air next week, but either way, it felt interesting, right? Because it's so quiet. I miss definitely the quietness. And so I hope they have a wonderful day. I hope they enjoy their classmates and their teachers, and I hope they do great. So I hope your family does well too. But last episode, I talked about magnesium, right? And the important role of magnesium and that is involved in over 300 biochemical functions. And so today I decided to do one on calcium. Now, calcium is another mineral. And calcium is also the most abundant mineral in the human body, crucial for various physiological processes. Some of the key roles of calcium are bone and teeth formation, muscle function, nerve transmission, and blood clotting. So it has a big role, right? It's also one of our electrolytes. So, if you take electrolytes, you'll see that as well. But the specific functions that calcium has in our body specifically, right, is mostly in bone health. So about 99% of our calcium is stored in our bones and teeth. It is important for our bone density and prevention of osteoporosis, but it also has function in our muscles. So it helps with contraction and relaxation, creates like a balance, right, of calcium and other minerals for the process of muscle contraction. And it also plays a role in nerve transmission, right? Calcium ions are essential in transmitting nerve signals and the involvement in synaptic transmission, so the communication of nerves, right? So it has really important roles, right? Not only sometimes when we think about calcium, we think bones and teeth, right? Calcium is for our bone and teeth, but there's other functions, right? As we talked about, the muscle function, contraction. Sometimes we also think about potassium, right, in terms of muscle spasms or cramps. Same thing with magnesium, but calcium also has a role in it, right? So calcium and sodium can play a role in it too. Same thing with like nerve connections, nerve transmissions, communication, right, between nerve signals. So calcium plays a huge role, right, in our bodies. So let's talk about what are the requirements, right? Like how much calcium should we consume? It really depends by age, gender, and life stages, right? If someone is pregnant or lactating, that also plays a role in how much calcium they're going to need. I actually created a quick handout for you, right, that you can use as a reference with the amounts. I'll just briefly discuss them as well, but you can always reference that handout back, right? I know there is a peak of calcium storage, meaning that the amount of calcium that we are going to store at a certain age, and that usually, our early years, we can make more bone deposits, right? That we can withdraw because our bone cells, right? They're not just like, oh, you grew bones, right? You got a certain height or a certain age, and that's it, right? But we continue to use bones, right? Our cells are breaking down and using cells and rebuilding cells, so, using the calcium for it, right, in our bones. And specifically, there's an age, right? I want to say that between age 25 and 30, our bones reach their maximum strength and density, meaning that that's the amount, the density and the strength that our bones are going to be at their peak. And then we kind of break down bones a little bit faster, right? And there are some specific, not things, I hit my mic, not specifically things, right? But activities that we can do to help with our bone density, right? Aside from nutrition. And one of them is doing strength training. So strength training has been shown to help with bone density specifically, right? So we have calcium, right? But we also have how to make these bones tighter, right? More dense. I actually did a client call, right? And we were talking about the importance of strength training, not only for getting strong, right? Having more flexibility, but also for bone density. And so, he asked, well, what does that really mean, right? Like, how do you know when your bones are dense? And so when you think about like your bone, right? So if you've never seen a bone, like microscopically, it's pretty tight, right? There's not really a lot of like space, right? And that's great because we want to make sure that they're tight. So if in case we fall or in case, we trip or we hit something, we hit our bone, right? We're not going to break it right away. That's why, the density, the tightness, right, of these cells or these bones are pretty packed. As we get older, right, or for some reason our bones are not dense or not strong, you start to see a little bit more space, right? And then we get to a stage where it's, they're brittle and that you see like literally you see bigger holes, right? And that is basically osteoporosis. And so the tighter, right, the space, like, I don't even know space, but the tighter they are, right, the density of them, going back to density, the better, right? Because then that is going to tell you that you have good bone density, which is going to prevent osteoporosis, which is going to prevent injuries, right? Or if you fall, breaking a bone. And so that all that is really important, right? But we also have to help our bodies be able to do that. So again, number one, or one of those factors, right, is strength training, which is going to help keep those bones tighter, right, and more dense. And then the other one that also plays a role in there, right, is calcium. Like how much calcium we have consumed, how much calcium we consume on a daily basis. And so I'm going to tell you that right now. So for ages 1 to 3 years old, right, they need about 700 milligrams of calcium. For children 4 to 8, about 1,000 milligrams. Teens 9 to 18, 1,300 milligrams, right? It is higher. I think this is the highest. You're going to see that because they are needing more calcium right there. They're still growing rapidly. There's many hormonal changes that are happening, and so they're needing more of that calcium as well. And then it kind of tapers off a little bit, tapers down. Adults 19 to 50 years old, about 1,000. Women 51 plus, 1,200 milligrams. Again, because now we're using what we store of the calcium, right? And so we have to be able to keep that demand going. And then for men 71 plus, again, 1,200 milligrams of calcium. And these are the recommendations based on the National Institute of Health. Again, you can reference that. If I went too fast or if you're busy, you'll have that handout. You can just click that at the end in the show notes. So now that we know that information, right, how can we get calcium, right? And so calcium is, as I mentioned, a mineral. It's something that we need, right? It's an essential mineral. It's not that our bodies are able to make it. We have to get it externally. And so we get it in two ways. One, we get it from foods. And two, we can get it from supplements, right? Like calcium supplements. But we do have to be more cautious here. So as always, food is going to be first, right? We want to be able to get all our nutrients if possible from food first. And then if for some reason we're not able to get that amount or if we're struggling, then we can add a supplement. But you always have to consult with your healthcare provider, either your doctor, your practitioner, your dietitian, to make sure that you're getting the right amount and you're not getting, too much. Because sometimes we think like, oh, because this is something that I need more is better, and that's not the case. Right? We have to also be cautious with that, and I'll go over that in just a moment. But let's see. Yeah, we talked about how much is there. Amount that is recommended. Okay, so when we think about, okay, where does calcium come from? Oftentimes we think about milk, right? There's a lot of commercials or ads about strong bonds in milk. And actually milk has been fortified for the most part with calcium and vitamin D. And so really not only dairy, right, it's going to give you it's going to be a rich source of calcium and vitamin D, but anything else that is fortified with calcium and vitamin D oftentimes. But you can also find it naturally, for example, in sardines. You can find it in salmon, right, your fatty fish, and your leafy greens. You're also going to find it in leafy greens and chia seeds, and your beans, and other foods that are also fortified. As I mentioned, your dairy like yogurt, mozzarella cheese, cottage cheese, your regular milk, but your plant-based milks too. Your plant-based milks are going to be fortified with calcium, vitamin D, and other nutrients. And so oftentimes, let's say if you're like, oh, I just drink soy milk, right? Soy milk can give you about a quarter, about 25% of what you need for the entire day, right? So this is based on like 1,000 milligrams. So if you have, three cups, right? 3 cups of soy milk or any other plant-based milk, just alone there, you're getting 75%, right? Or close to that of what you need of calcium during the entire day. Now, if you add tofu, right, let's say if you're having following like a plant-based plan, right? But even if you're not, right, maybe you're drinking almond milk for other reasons, you still get at least 25% of your daily value that you need from calcium by drinking the plant-based milk, and then adding, let's say you do add salmon, right, that will give you about 180 milligrams for about 3 ounces, right? And if you add oatmeal or any other breakfast cereals that are going to be fortified, right, the same. Then you use some chia seeds or you add some leafy greens, right? So you can absolutely get the amount that is recommended, 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day, by making sure that you're adding a variety of these foods with, on a consistent basis. And that way you can get that amount of calcium that you need. Now, we can ask the question, well, how do I know how much calcium I'm having, right? The only way that we're going to know is by tracking it, right? Or by choosing, your high calcium foods and tracking them like that. Even if you just worry about tracking the calcium, you can know that way. But if you want something more comprehensive, right, like you're like, I want to make sure that I'm having calcium and vitamin D and these other foods or these other nutrients, then using an application, right, to help you track these nutrients can be really helpful. So that's where naturally, right, where the calcium can come from, specifically from foods. Again, you'll have that handout that you can reference back. And then I'll add other resources to give you that specific amounts. Even if you go to the USDA website, they have like a nutrition data analysis, and in there you can also find so many other foods that are rich in calcium. So I'll probably add that resource for you as well, so you can take a look at that too, and you can create your meals that have these high or rich calcium foods. Now, how about supplements? And this is something that I often get asked, right? Like, okay, can I take a calcium supplement? Again, as I mentioned, you have to first talk to your healthcare provider, your dietitian, whoever you're working with, to help you with your supplements, medication, nutrition, wherever it is, because you want to make sure that you're getting, one, that you need it, right? Two, that you're adding these foods, right, that are rich in calcium. Again, because these specific foods that you're adding, let's say you're focusing on soy milk and tofu, right? You're not getting only calcium from soy milk and tofu. You're also getting protein. You're also getting fiber. You're getting these other nutrients. if you add just a calcium supplement, right, you're only going to get the calcium, and that's it. So that's why food is first, right? Because you get these so many other nutrients by adding a variety of calcium-rich foods. But let's talk about calcium supplements. There, you can find it. Oh my gosh, the supplement industry is just humongous. But there's so many out there, right? Some of them are included, not a lot. You won't see these calcium being added to a multivitamin. You'll see a smaller amount, not necessarily to a higher percentage of your daily value, because sometimes calcium interacts with other nutrients, specifically with iron, right? Oftentimes, calcium might get absorbed in all the iron. And so if you have iron deficiency anemia or any issues with your iron, and you're taking iron and calcium, there could be that issue there. So again, that's why you have to talk to your healthcare provider or even your pharmacist, right? And just letting them know, these are all the medications, these are all the supplements that I'm taking. Can you tell me which those interact with? And that way you take the supplements the right way. But there are different types of calcium, right? Calcium carbonate, calcium citrate. And so in people specifically that have low levels of stomach acid, right, the solubility rate of calcium carbonate is lower. So that can also reduce the absorption of calcium. So thinking about, the things that, also the medications that you're taking, right? Because sometimes the acidity of the stomach actually it's needed, right, to absorb some of these vitamins or minerals. And so if you're taking medications that affect that acidity, right, that can also play a role in the absorption of calcium and how much is absorbed. But most of the absorption of calcium, again, in supplements is greater when they are taken with food, right, because it helps usually. Let's see what else here in terms of the supplements. They usually come in, for the most part, not always, right? They might be added with vitamin D. Vitamin D is needed for the calcium to get absorbed better. You might see them in like 500 or 600 milligrams. Sometimes some of them are lower. But you have to remember, right, that if it's a supplement, you're not going to want to take 1,000 milligrams of calcium if you're working on, or if you're able to add these high calcium rich foods, right? Which is the idea here. You want to do that first and then supplement, right? Hence the name, with a supplement. Ideally, I'm going to say that should be fine. 100, okay, just reading a few things here. Even if something that I haven't mentioned yet. Okay, anyway, so there's that. Now, let's talk about specifically deficiencies, right? And one of the ways to measure deficiencies in terms of calcium, right, is either doing usually the blood test is just going to show like the calcium circulating in the blood for the most part. But, if you do a bone density test, a DEXA scan, right, where it measures your bone density, and it shows that you have low bone density, then you're needing a little bit more calcium, right? Or maybe you're not meeting your calcium needs, and so that's important to know. But there are also some deficiencies, right, and some symptoms that you can get if you have a calcium deficiency. Now, I'm going to mention these symptoms, but you have to be cautious too, because these symptoms could also be affected by other factors, right? So, for example, muscle cramps, right? If you have muscle cramps, it doesn't only mean that you have a calcium deficiency. It could be other things, right? Maybe you overtrain or you're dehydrated. So I don't want you to look or listen to these symptoms and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a calcium deficiency. Let me add tons of calcium, right? No, finding out the root cause of why is it that you're having that symptom specifically. So muscle cramps, tingling, brittle nails, frequent fractures, right? That's a little bit more calcium bone specific. Some long-term effects, right, like calcium deficiency, osteoporosis, and weakened bones. Now, I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on factors affecting calcium absorption, right? The boosters, the things, right, the nutrients that are going to boost absorption of calcium, as I mentioned, is vitamin D and also low oxalate greens. I might have to do just a podcast episode on oxalates because that's a huge one too in kidney health. Inhibitors that affect calcium absorption are high sodium intake. So if you're consuming a lot of salty foods, right? Because calcium, think of calcium and sodium as like opposites, right? If there is too much sodium, right, almost like calcium has to leave, right? There is that imbalance. So if you're having high calcium intake, right, that could be affecting your calcium absorption. Caffeine, sometimes that also affects your calcium, right? Too much caffeine. The general recommendation is no more than 300 milligrams of caffeine a day, coming from all kinds of sources, not only coffee, alcohol too. Alcohol is absorbed in the stomach, right? That affects the absorption and also affects the absorption of calcium. High oxalate foods, right? If we're eating this higher amount of oxalate foods, for example, spinach, but I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, spinach is bad. No, there's times when we can add them and also the amounts, right? So if we have more of these issues with calcium, we can always choose different leafy greens that are lower in oxalates. So there's the part of it. Now, when we think about calcium overload, right, meaning there's too much calcium, what we have to watch out for is more so it's going to come from your supplements. The recommendation, depending on your age, let's say you were needing 1,000 milligrams, but you're like, oh no, I'm going to take more because more is better. And you take over 1,000 milligrams from supplements, and you're still getting some from food, right? Sometimes that's where the overload is going to be, again, because oftentimes supplements are going to be absorbed better. And you're only getting calcium, right? As opposed to with your foods that you're getting other nutrients. So excessive calcium from supplements specifically may cause kidney stones, right? So if you have recurrent kidney stones, really looking at your calcium, this is more like calcium stones that are formed. And so looking at that specifically, if you have recurrent kidney stones, like, okay, am I taking a lot of calcium supplements? But you can also feel fatigue, and you might also have cardiac issues. But again, really looking at the root cause of why you're having these symptoms, right? Not only being like, oh, I have calcium overload, right? Like you really have to look into the root cause. So how can we maintain healthy calcium levels, right? So now that we know this information, now that we know where calcium comes from or where we can get calcium from, how can we maintain these healthy calcium levels? And this is almost like not the trend, right? But it comes to this time after time, not only with calcium, same thing with magnesium, same thing with every single nutrient, is having more of these balanced meals, right? Like really focusing, if you have a deficiency in calcium, or if you do know that, hey, my bone density is pretty low, really making sure that at every single meal, right, or at least at 2 meals, you're having like calcium-rich foods, right? And on a weekly basis, at least 3 to 4 times, you're having these high calcium-rich foods. Ideally, you want to have them daily, right? Because it's something that you need on a daily basis. So by being really strategic, right, at adding these foods, and this is something that I see often, more so with like teen clients, that they're not drinking their milk, right? Either their plant-based milk or their regular milk, they're just not drinking it. And so they're not getting the calcium that they need, right? Because they're not doing that at any of their meals. And maybe they might be replacing it with sugary drinks or with soda, right? Specifically your dark soda that is going to have phosphoric acid. Now, phosphoric acid, it's going to bind with calcium, right? To be able to either get metabolized or get digested or whatever. And so if you're drinking lots of dark soda, right, and there's not enough calcium circulating in the blood, that is going to be pulled right from your muscles essentially. And so then you're getting even more weaker bones, right? So you want to be able to really think about those things, because phosphoric acid, and you can see it on the ingredients list, right, of your soda. It's oftentimes mostly on your dark sodas. Sometimes you have it on your clear sodas too. So if you're drinking that, right, you're replacing that and not having your high calcium high calcium plant-based milks, then you're already having that deficiency, right? So really thinking about those things. But also if you are needing a supplement, right? Again, talking to your healthcare provider, talking to your dietitian, to your pharmacist, to make sure that you're getting the right one. But as we get older, right, we saw that for women 51 plus, they need 1,200 milligrams of sodium, and for men 71 plus, they need 1,200 milligrams of calcium, excuse me. You need calcium. And so making sure, again, right, that if we are not getting enough, right, you can supplement, not replace, supplement with a calcium supplement that your healthcare provider recommends. Regular exercise, right, weight-bearing activities to help strengthen those bones. So strength training, resistance training. And oftentimes when I have a client that says, I don't want to go to the gym, or I don't want to do lift weights, even if you use your body, right, to do these strength training exercises, or even if you think about the daily activities that you do that require you to use your muscles, right, or to pick things up, because as we get older, that's what is going to help us, right, to be able to do our daily activities. So if it's picking up a box, right, you're doing it properly, or moving items, right, in your home, or even doing using your cans, like can of food, right, doing them as weight, things like that. So you don't really have to go to the gym to do strength training or weight bearing exercises. You can do it at home anytime, right? It's just being able to do that, because as you get older, again, one, if you're not getting enough calcium and adding strength training, imagine your bones, right? How much your bones are going to change, and the density of them is going to go down, right? That is just a fact. And so you want to be able to prevent that, right? Which is going to prevent injuries, fractures, and just not being able to be mobile. So thinking about those things in long term, right? So if you hate exercising, or if you hate doing strength training, find a way to add it, right? That it doesn't feel like it's a chore, that it's more so looking at what things you do on a daily basis that require your muscles, right? And doing a few reps of that to help you. Bone health monitoring, right, is another way to maintain healthy calcium levels. And as I mentioned, that one of them is doing like a bone density test, like a DEXA scan, once a year, twice a year, depending on how often your healthcare provider requires that. Especially if you are at risk population, right, you're elderly, or you've been, historically been told that you have low bone density. You want to keep track of that, right? Because again, as we age, it's not that we're, adding more calcium or making our bones stronger, right? We're actually needing more. So really thinking about that. I talked about life stages, right, that have increased needs of calcium, like childhood, pregnancy, and aging. So, if you're in those categories, really looking into your calcium needs and what amount of calcium you're currently taking. Some dietary restrictions, right? There are some ways of eating that might restrict the amount of calcium. So, for example, vegans, lactose intolerant population, but it doesn't mean that you are going to, just because you're vegan or just because you are lactose intolerant, that you are going to be deficient by default, right? No, we still have to be really, really intentional about making sure that we're adding these calcium-rich foods, right? Your plant-based milks, again, they're going to give you 25% of your daily value. If you're adding chia, if you're adding leafy greens, if you're adding almonds, if you're adding these other foods, you can really get your calcium that you need, even if you're following these more dietary restrictions. Okay, my friend, I think that is it. Just to do a quick recap, right? We talked about calcium. Calcium is a mineral. It is another abundant mineral in the body. We find it you're going to find it mostly in your bones and teeth. there are different recommendations for different life stages, right? And you can reference that back on that handout that I'm giving you. Some sources of calcium, right, that I talked about are, your dairy products like milk, yogurt, cheese, but you can also find it in fortified orange juice or any other juice that is fortified, your plant-based milks, your tofu, your fatty fish like salmon, your soybeans, your fortified breakfast cereals, I think it's the leafy greens, your chia seeds, sometimes bread might also be fortified. So you can find it in different foods, supplements. You have to make sure that you talk to your healthcare provider first before adding them to make sure that you get the right amount. More is not better because that can also affect you, right? You can also get symptoms. You want to make sure that you are monitoring your bone density, right? By either doing a DEXA scan or talking to your healthcare provider about how you can monitor your bones. And that is it. So check out that handout that I made for you. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can send me a text when you go into the podcast episode. It gives you that little icon on top. Send us a text. If there's anything that I missed, let me know too. But you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, stay safe, and stay strong, my friend. Talk to you in another episode. Bye-bye for now.
This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.